Welcome, everyone. I hope everybody's having a good Saturday night. I'm just going to go ahead and share this into the page. Tonight, we are going to have Heather here. She is a crime scene investigator. Before we start, I just want to make it known, and, she'll kind of explain too that she has looked at both Joseph and Lacey's autopsy. Now, I just want to stress that she does not have all the pieces of the puzzle. This is just her perspective and a little bit of insight on the things that she learned just from reading the autopsy. I welcome you, Heather. I very much appreciate you coming on and doing this for us. I think it will be such amazing insight. And I don't think it's really been too much public knowledge as far as the autopsy. So I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, honestly, not much is public knowledge about the case I'm finding. When I went to, because basically, before you asked me to look into it at all, I knew absolutely nothing about it, never heard about it, never anything like that. So I naturally go onto the internet to see what, if anything, is on there about it and find that there really isn't anything.
Nothing. Yeah, I did the
There's
same.
there's two articles, but one of the articles is basically copied. Just
Yeah,
it's the same
the
article, just by
exact
two
same.
different sources. So there really wasn't anything that I could get off of the internet. That's another reason I always do like to talk with the families before I do. But before I got to speak to the families, I asked each of the families to send me the autopsy reports. And the only two autopsy reports that I was able to get and to look at was Lacey and Joseph.
Yeah, I know. And then that's why I want to stress now, you like you said, you really didn't know too much about it coming in, which is a good thing, I feel, as you looked at the autopsies, because from just talking with the families and a few other people, it's interesting because we have this one thing being put out to some of the family members, and then another completely different. And I'm just referencing as far as what the families were told about the positions and stuff like that. And then hearing you and what you had to say the other night was really interesting. And we have this you know a set of parents and a set of family believes that they were all grouped together, and
Mm-hmm.
that's been the impression. And then one of them were kind of on their own a little bit. And just hearing you, of course, you would know more about the autopsy reports and how to read them.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to hear what you had to say. And like I said, you didn't know these two position theory. We'll just say theories for right now. Accounts.
I
You didn't know about them all when you had read the autopsies.
No, as a matter of fact, the question only came to mind after reading both of them and then asking one of the families if they had any idea where the bodies were found in relation to the ignition point, either in the house or whatnot. Um, and then I was told by one family one way, and then I was told by the other family the other way. Which the first families um, out or what they were told is what my original thought would have been, is that, at least, like I said, let me reiterate, I do not have TJ's nor Lizzie's autopsy report to look at theirs to know
Right.
where they
Right.
might have been, um, or if they were between either
And this is
Joseph
going
and.
solely by what you read in the reports. This is not taking the account of
So
what has been told to the family.
let me, okay, I'll start with Lacey. Lacey was burned very, very badly. Over 98% of her body. She was 4th-degree burns. Um, her she did not have a brain to be able to be tested because it had burned completely out of her skull. So there was no way of them able to test for trauma or anything like that with her brain. Um, Also, other major organs such as kidney, her liver, a couple of other organs, and ironically, they were on a completely, uh, ironically, they were on opposite sides of the body. So one was a right kidney and one was the liver, or vice versa. Sorry. Anyway, I don't have them right in front of me. So, anyways, um, but the one kidney was half the size of the other at that point, which means that it was more than likely badly burned and charred. Um, Lacey was they did find black soot in her trachea that was intact, which means that she was at least breathing and alive
Okay.
when it caught fire, because the way I explained it was the trachea is very um, insulated. It's not something to where if the trachea had been burned or had burned holes in it or whatever, they would have notated that, but they didn't. So that leads us to believe that another one of her organs that was half the size of the other was a lung, um, which so pretty much that goes hand in hand with smoke inhalation.
So she was
Um,
breathing. We know for
yeah, and you would have to be breathing in order to have that soot go down into the trachea, and they test it far enough down to where it would have had to have been, breathed in and gone down. So we do know that she was in fact alive and breathing. At least we don't know whether she was conscious or not, because we don't have a brain to show any type of anything like that. Um, they did do a urine alcohol and drug screen. She did test positive for alcohol, and she also tested positive for Darvocet, which and methadone. Back then it was not what it is today.
yeah.
So what it
Hmm.
would be basically our equivalent of Percocet today. Um, and that's really kind of insignificant, because that doesn't tell us whether that was consumed that night. It doesn't tell us whether it was consumed 2 weeks ago. It doesn't tell us how much she consumed. I mean, they're just really, that's pretty not significant, especially when you consider back then, Darvocet, you could get your hands on it. Like,
Yeah. Hmm.
it wasn't something, it
I
wasn't a
mean, I think
Schedule
I
Two.
had.
It wasn't,
I think my first time I had broke my arm. I was 9, 10. I think that was the first time I ever experienced. Yeah, I was
yeah. And
young.
I was 15 years old and was
Hmm.
in a very bad car accident and
Hmm.
was on it for quite a while. So it wasn't anything like what it is today.
Yeah.
So that was fairly insignificant. Both
So what was
she
the alcohol level? Do you know offhand? Was it over, legal limit?
well, that goes by a percentage,
Okay.
and theirs goes by percentage, not blood alcohol. Like, some, it
Okay.
wasn't blood, um,
Oh,
or
that, yeah.
breath, or
Mhm.
so. It was 0.15. I'll have to look and I can get that for you for sure.
Okay.
But hers was one. I can't remember if it was 15% or 0.15, and then Joseph's was even less than that. It was like 5. So, um,
Because I do know, there were drinking. I had people, close to them come in and say they did have a bottle. They talked about spilling it because about 10 or 11, they wanted a second bottle and the liquor store was closed. So we know between 10 and 11, everything was good. The party was still going. They were trying to get another bottle. They were not able to get another bottle, and we're not sure if they actually spilled the first one. So, between 6 of them, and we know that they had one bottle. I'm not sure how big the bottle was. I would really like to find that stuff out. But the rumors and the whispers were they were shit faced. They were so drunk that they probably passed out and didn't even know. So it's interesting, to confirm that they weren't that drunk. Actually,
They weren't that intoxicated. I mean, especially if you consider Joseph was, when I asked the family, around 200 pounds. And Lacey was, when I asked the family, right around 160 pounds. So she would not have been any more intoxicated than Joseph. I mean, maybe a little bit, but and that would
yeah.
probably, you know, the amount that was she was a little more than Joseph could account for
And
in
there
body
was no
weight.
Xanax
And
or any types of those in their system that you've seen.
no, Joseph didn't have even Darvocet. All he had was alcohol. He didn't even have any type of drug at all.
Okay.
They both came in unclothed. My initial thought on that would be because they were so badly burned that there just wasn't any clothes left.
Now, do you think it's possible that there could have been remnants of cloth?
Yeah, but usually they usually they will, like, in one that I've read, where it would say there was something around the ankle and we thought about, oh, it was probably a sock
Okay.
or like some sort of a remnant. It's possible,
Okay.
but this the autopsy was not too incredibly thorough, because he listed, um Joseph at 98% burns over his entire body and fourth degree burns. And then he listed Lacey the exact same, but they were obviously burned
And
completely different than each
and
other.
did you
I
tell
mean,
that?
different than each other.
Yeah. By further reading through the autopsy, did that kind of give insight to they weren't burned the same for you?
Yeah. Yeah. When they, Joseph's actually still had some tissue. His organs, his lungs, actually, they could tell that he had the congestion in his lungs from the smoke inhalation.
Okay.
Whereas Lacey, they couldn't. Joseph's, Joseph's organs were not, they were all the size that they should have been.
Okay.
Um, which will tell you a whole lot on that end of it too. Um,
Now
where was
tell
the
me
other?
tell me why that you think this not so much that you don't think it's possible because like you said you don't have the other two autopsies. And that could tell you completely different. But as far
Mhm.
as what you have seen right now, why do you think that the grouping together, at least with Joseph and Lacey, doesn't seem to?
Okay, so the example I give is if you are grilling two steaks, and Joseph and Lacey, they were similar, um, weight.
Yeah.
Not, I mean, not too far, but if you're grilling two steaks and you have them on the grill and the heat is the exact same in that spot, and it's when you take those pull them two steaks, they're going to be generally pretty dang close to the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, um, Lacey was considerably, um, burned more than Joseph, to the point, like I said, to the point of where her brain was no longer in her skull. It was burned out completely. And Joseph, he had a brain because they took it out and they tested his brain, and his brain didn't show any type of trauma or anything like
Okay.
that. So that's that right there. I mean, it's apples to apples. And, so again, I don't have the pictures, I don't have any of that. So, you know, if you have a puzzle that's got 500 pieces to it and you only have 450 pieces, you can get, generally
Mm-hmm.
the picture, but you're not going to get the whole picture. But without having TJ and Lizzie's autopsy, I don't know. Could it have been that Lacey was on the outside and Joseph was on the other side? I mean, that's possible. And then I could see the burn, between the other two getting worse that way, or
Yeah.
better this way, or whatnot. But we just don't have that. But what I have found pretty interesting is that where they're saying that the kids were, one family is saying, and then the other family is saying another way. um when Before I even knew, after when I looked at the autopsies, and I had already made the determination that Lacey was further towards what I would consider an ignition point. um Before I ever even knew that, I had already made that
Okay.
determination that Lacey and Joseph were not in the same place, not next to each other.
Oh,
So, I mean, and so I get that makes me question, why why are there two different stories told to
yes.
this each family?
Yeah. I
I
mean, and they're
mean,
not
and this is a huge, like, it's not even like in close proximity. Like, these are completely
scenario.
different areas, like completely different scenarios, and they're not even close to being the same.
And it just seems,
So,
from what you were reading, and like I want to everybody point out, you read them before you knew about any positioning.
right.
And your determination kind of sits with what you've
I
been.
read the I read the autopsies and came up with my opinion on them long before I even talked to the families.
Because
So that
I have been told that, I wasn't given specifics, but it was, the three of them being Lacey, TJ, and Lizzie were kind of grouped together, as in they were sitting on a couch, and then maybe Joseph was sitting in a chair. And this is going off based off of personalities. It just made more sense that Joseph he wasn't really the flirt. TJ was the
mhm.
flirt. He wasn't afraid to go mingle with the ladies. And Joseph, he was kind of more introvert and so it just, when they were being told this, it made sense to them, because yeah, it did. So it was girl, boy, girl. And then one of them were kind of on the out, loan, on the loan. So,
Right.
and what you've
And
said, if they were that close in proximity, now is it possible that they were all three on a couch and Lacey just happened to be, where the fire was first came from?
I mean,
It would
anything's
make sense that
possible.
Joseph has, their burns are so, you're not saying that that is not.
No, I'm not saying that it's not. What I am saying is that, if I had TJ and Lizzie's
Yeah.
autopsies, it could have been TJ, Lizzie, and Lacey, and Joseph off to the side, because Joseph and Lizzie are burned to completely different. So, like, that supports what
Yeah.
I'm saying, that they were in two different spots.
Yes. And that's what,
Um,
yeah.
and so am I saying that the one story that we're getting is absolutely false? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I can tell you with almost absolute certainty that it wasn't Joseph and Lacey that were.
Yeah,
They weren't together. They weren't that close to each other. But the side of the story that I heard puts them all, except for Joseph and Lizzie, puts them completely different spots from each other. Only Joseph and Lizzie were together.
Yeah. And,
So
just talking with some people, it just makes a little more sense. There were talks that maybe Lacey and TJ weren't like together, but they were kind of flirting and crushing that night. And I'm not saying,
right.
Lizzie was there for Joseph, but maybe it was kind of, just a
But who
thing either
knows?
way.
I mean,
And who knows? But
who
it
knows when
just
kids
seems to
start
be that
drinking?
it's more supported as what we know now.
For what we know now,
Yeah.
that would be more supported with what the autopsies are saying.
And it just, like you said, my question keeps coming back to, why
But
are
within,
there even why are there even two accounts of where they
you
were?
know, and I can say with absolute certainty that at least Joseph and Lacey were alive and they were breathing when the fire was started.
Well,
Because I had heard a rumor that none of them were alive when the
yes,
house was set on fire, and that is not true. There's no possibility of that because both
they
of them
were
have,
breathing.
especially Joseph. Joseph really has clear cut smoke inhalation. Like I said, he has the fluid in the lungs. He has the congestion. He has the soot, and he's got heavy soot in his trachea. So, but without 100%, with a certainty, they were at least breathing and
Now,
alive.
I want to ask you about the controversy about this the coroner who got fired for all his shenanigans, what they chalked up to odd behavior. Now, is there do you think that with everything there is good reason to maybe not take his word for? Is there reason? Do you think there would be reason to have a second opinion done on the autopsies?
I think there absolutely is. Anytime that any type of negligence on somebody doing autopsies, anytime there's any type of proof, absolutely that opens the door for anybody to be in question. My other question was on that stuck out to me was how Lacey and Joseph were substantially burned different. They were differently burned, but he listed it the exact same. And get this, and Joseph has so in an autopsy, you get a paper that has a body on it, and it'll have the front and it'll
Mm-hmm.
have the back. On Joseph's, that paper's there, but he just nonchalantly just scribbled all the way down the bodies on both sides. Okay.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, okay, well, that would have been nice to know. Did he have fingers? Did he have toes? Like, I mean, okay.
Yes.
Lacey did not have one at all. Her diagram there wasn't one in her autopsy at all. And if there was, they didn't get it to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that makes me question a little bit more as to, did he just do this real quick and was like, okay, yep, they're burned. Like, I would have said that Lacey was more like 100% of her body
Was burned.
Yeah. But he has them both listed at 98% and both of them 4th degree. So
yeah.
it's just that was kind of odd to me, just because you can tell, especially, like, I'll go back to it again. Lacey was burned so badly that there was no brain left in her skull, but Joseph's was, and it was able to be tested. So that's pretty significant. I would say.
And I just feel like those details matter so much,
They
especially
do.
in cases that are this questionable.
Well,
It
when you
just
have a
makes me not
case,
I mean, I'm not saying I question the whole autopsy, but I do because I know who gave it.
yeah,
So it just now I have been told that one of them were badly burned enough to where they could not be embalmed. Now, could that say we stirred up enough shit and people are like they need to come back up? Now, with them being embalmed or not, how would that make a difference significantly? What would they be able to determine 2 decades later?
I don't think either of them could have been embalmed. There wasn't anything to embalm. There really wasn't much
So
tissue
would
left.
that damage chances of them coming up now and having evidence say, I know we were talking that Lacey did not have a brain, but could they determine from the bones if
If they're
there was
the
blunt
only
force
thing,
trauma on how they were broke? Would that still
you
be a
know,
possibility today after all these years?
with the bones,
Mhm.
absolutely. Because if gunshot wounds can be seen in bone if it hit bone, and if that could always be a possibility. Skull fractures can be seen. That could always be a possibility. It could show broken legs, broken arms.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So there
Something
are
that
things
might,
that we could still be able to
but there's probably not going to be much to for any type of toxicology
yeah.
or anything like that. But bones, yes. And then we could also tell another, they do have archaeological doctors that can come in and they can look at the bone and they can say, well, this bone was burned this far and blah blah blah. um Archaeological investigators. And I mean, I don't know that they will show anything more.
But
um
if there is something more, would it still be there to tell?
yeah, in the bones, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bones are there forever. Just like, they're still digging up cavemen.
So
You
if
know what I
this,
mean?
if this
So
whole theory, and I think it's a good thing because I don't know, after 2 decades, I feel like people should at least be able to know these details. We're having stories out here that TJ was shot between the eyes. Now, if they brought him back up, would they be able to still see that he was
abs-
or not?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if he was shot between the eyes, I mean, there's a bone right here. You would see some sort of skull fracture. I mean, and depending on the size of the projectile, but I mean, it could have bounced all over his head. It could have, I mean, it could have done lots of things. So yeah, I mean, if they were looking for it and they wanted to pull him up and look at his skull and have it looked at, or
I
say,
mean, we may never be able to
somebody say
tell.
he was shot in the chest, there may be a nick, or in the rib or something. I don't think that it would be completely a waste of time. I mean, you're looking for evidence that obviously may or
Yes.
may not have been taken back then.
Yes.
And so, I mean, you're
You
can
know,
you
and
can
bringing
you
them
prove that?
back up would be a very hard decision for the parents. And, they know they know what that would bring. I was just, my heart, is just, would it be worth it after all this time?
In my
Would it
opinion,
be,
I don't think that I would exhume them. I don't think that the chance of finding anything that's going to be especially helpful in these bones outweighs these parents having to go through this again, and old wounds being rehatched. I think what needs to be focused on now is getting the person that knows what happened to talk. Because even still, if they do bring these kids up and say they do find that TJ was shot between the eyes, you still have no evidence, no physical evidence to
Yeah,
prove
I get
who
that,
did it.
but it's
You know what I mean?
and that just brings me back to I see that, but then you have 2 decades, and half of me wonders if that's exactly what investigators want, is all this hearsay rumor as an excuse to say, "Hey, we can't tell if it's an accident or it was set on purpose." But, I feel like possibly bringing them up and, telling everybody, TJ was
And that would
Lacey was
ultimate
not, her head was not Bastion. It was just due to the fire. I think these
right.
things would significantly
And
put a lot to rest.
if the family is open and okay to do that and wants to do that, then by all means. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not gonna hurt anything. It's not going to, if you don't get any more evidence, great. If you do, great. You know what I mean? It might put to rest some of those rumors, but do I think that they're going to get any evidence that's going to help blow the
To, like,
case wide open?
physical tie somebody to that case,
No.
no. Yeah.
Unless it was, they could find a projectile that's still
Yeah.
left in the body, and then they could match that up to somebody who, but even that
Yeah.
is going back 20 years through who owned what
Yes.
guns and if they even were registered to who had them, which I would be pretty inclined to think they probably weren't. So, I think my opinion is there's somebody that knows. There's a few people that know exactly what happened.
That's my belief.
And that's what needs to be focused on now, is getting that to come out. Because I can sit here and I can say this is where the kids were and this is what I found. And, really, like I said, really in both autopsies, there wasn't anything that was super significant. There wasn't anything that was like an aha moment, like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
well, that's why, or there just really wasn't. The only thing I can say is that I don't believe that Lacey and at least Joseph were in the same place, in the place. Also, the other thing we have to keep in mind when thinking about, especially when they're thinking they were knocked unconscious or they were uh, something happened to them, why they couldn't get out. Um, it could be something as simple as they were asleep,
Because we
and
know where
it
they were
takes
breathing, and that doesn't mean that they were awake. They could have very well been
right.
asleep.
It was 3:30 in the
Yeah.
morning, so for all we know, they could have fell asleep. They went to sleep,
But
and
we do know that at
a
least
trailer.
Lacey and
A,
Joseph were breathing.
they
They
were.
weren't,
We do know they were. They were not dead. They were alive and they were breathing. Do we know whether they were conscious or not? No,
no.
but we do know they were alive and breathing. And everybody's like, well, why couldn't they get up and run out? Well, if you're asleep, how long do you think it takes for you to smell smoke? And then this was back in, I would venture to bet that this was probably a 1970s trailer. And those things will burn in less than 3 minutes, if not faster. And they have insulation that will just, and that stuff can't even be used in trailer homes any longer because it was so flammable. So, how
Now,
long would it take you to
things,
smell smoke?
now I know this, you may not be able to answer this, but I figured you would be the perfect person to see if we can answer it. Now, would all of, say they found a spot, the spot outside
Hmm.
versus inside. That would
Hmm.
be in, say, the fire marshal, the fire report, wouldn't it? Wouldn't, as
Yes,
they walk in, the
it
step,
should be.
what would protocol be? Can you, can say you're going, have you ever been on a fire scene yourself?
Very few, but I can.
I
So
mean, I'm sure it's
when
protocol.
anytime a house is burned, and arson is suspected, they have to come in the fire marshal, and so in different states it's different. Like they'll have an actual person from the state that comes out, and they go in and they do their investigation, but they can tell, they know
When they're going on
where an
that
accelerant,
scene, yeah.
where they know where an accelerant was used, and they call it hot, that's why I keep talking about the ignition point,
Okay.
because it will be substantially, the fire will burn hot, and it will be substantially darker and blacker
And
than
that's where initially
anywhere
they say
else.
that it starts.
And they can
Okay.
tell, they'll know exactly where that fire started, or roundabout. But especially if an accelerant was used, they can tell, and they can see what kind of accelerant. They can pretty much tell what kind of accelerant it was, whether it was kerosene, whether it was gasoline,
Okay.
whether it was whatever.
And all of
They
that would
know,
have been
they'll
noted in
know.
reports.
Should
Like
have been
protocol,
noted. Hmm. It would have been noted, especially if they investigate, if the fire marshal came in and did an investigation, and then they have to write that up, especially in an arson report,
Now, would that
because
be
it sounds to
would
me
a
like,
police report kind of note those things too, or do they kind of keep those separate?
and pretty much the police reports are for um chargeable offenses. So
Okay.
if the fire marshal came back and said that there was arson suspected, then that report would indicate arson suspected, subject, or suspect unknown
Okay.
at this time,
Yeah.
pending
Yeah.
investigation. But yeah, it would definitely, and a police report may not, but if they suspected arson and they came back, and the fire guys,
Even
inspector,
suspected it. Even if
if
they,
they,
because I know that they had arson and bomb come in,
and I don't know what they found.
but they would
And
have their own
unfortunately,
report as well, also, right? So that would be the volunteer fire department that was on scene. We have their report and their initial finding, and then we would have the arson and bomb report. Would that be separate? Or would it all be kind
definitely
of
the
tied in?
arson and bomb report would be separate. I
Okay.
would venture to bet that a volunteer fire department, um, that's probably why they called somebody else in, is because I don't know that they would have the training or the resources. I'm not in an area where we have
Right.
many
Well, I've heard many people
volunteer.
say that a big thing could have been because they were volunteer and they weren't kind of
It
equipped and
they
kind of got
you
handled.
don't have to really, you have to go through some training to be a
Yeah.
volunteer firefighter. It's nothing like being a firefighter. I mean, I knew of a kid, he would just barely turned 18 years old, and or actually he was under 18, he was 17, and he was going out to the scenes with his dad. And so
Yeah.
really, all they worry about is if they can run a hose. You know what I mean? And
Right. Right. Yeah.
yeah. And so, for all we know, it could have been something like that situation, and they really didn't know. So that's why they called somebody else in to do the investigation.
Now,
And
while I
PD,
have you, I was going to ask you, I know that this is something, there wasn't a report on or something that you could look at. I'm not even sure if it was even noted in the investigation. I just, a lot of people seem to think that Derek not remembering may be, whether he is just he really doesn't remember or he just doesn't want to talk about some things have been the question. And I kind of look at it from this point, okay, he was hit on the back of the head, and my biggest question is, and I'm not a nurse, I'm an STNA, but still, like you said, I'm pretty much the volunteer firefighter here. You know what I mean?
I
So I'm
mean,
like the make sure I can run a tube for the nurses, make sure I can do the vital. I'm just the
right.
so, but still, you're trained on certain things, and like head injuries are one of those, especially if you're working around elderly, is a very, very big thing to worry about. So that's kind of what drew me in, I think. So I kind of wanted to talk about it with somebody. My questions have really been, was this a blow that could have caused this amount of memory loss? If so, would you think that he would have been taken to the hospital?
Yeah, I mean,
And if you don't know,
surely.
I just figured I'd try to see
Well,
what your insight was.
he he they claim that he talked to the police. The police would have known, in a he would have had some evidence of a head injury. And then I'm sure since he was drug out of the car, that the EMS would have at least been there to check him
Check it
over
out.
and make sure he was okay. And and then he said, I got hit in the head, and I don't remember anything, and I can't do this, or whatever. They were going to be like, sir, you need to go to the hospital. We need to go get you checked out. You are showing classic symptoms of a head injury. We need to go get you checked out.
Okay.
Um, I would
Especially if
I would
you
have a hard time believing that EMS wouldn't do that. And you can absolutely, but you know what? If EMS says, "Hey, we need to take you to the hospital. We think you've got a head injury."
you can
You can refuse, but you have
refuse,
to
yeah.
sign a you have well, now, I don't know how it was then, but now you have to sign a paper so
Oh,
that way they're
okay.
not liable. So you
Yeah,
have
of
to sign,
course.
it's basically like signing AMA at a hospital. You have to sign a paper with EMS saying, I don't want to go to the hospital. They
Yeah.
think I should go to
Mhm.
the hospital, but I don't want to go to the hospital. So I'll take myself later, or whatever. You have to sign a paper because that releases their liability. That
Liability.
way, if you don't get checked out and you go home and you go to sleep and you die in your sleep, they're not liable because they told you, hey, I think you might have a head injury and we need to take you to the hospital.
And see, just in my experience with working, and again, this was with older people, but a head injury, if it was enough, especially for them to lose consciousness at any point, that was a ride to the hospital.
Yes. And
Absolutely. If consciousness
that's
was gone, it was just our
and
protocol.
that's one of EMS's questions. Did you lose consciousness at any
Yeah.
point in time? And if you say yes, they're going to be like, we're going to the hospital, because
But he could still
that's
refuse.
he could still
Even then,
refuse,
even then, he could still refuse. So
but he would have had to. I would highly doubt that that's changed in 20 years, that
he
they
would have had to
wouldn't
sign
have
that.
to sign saying, hey, I refuse to go to the hospital. I mean, it very well could have. I mean, but I would highly doubt it. I would be very suspicious of that,
Would you think that
because
with the outcome it would have been, since everything appeared to be fine, do you think it would have been an injury to cause long-term memory loss? Maybe some short-term memory loss, amnesia?
your your short-term memory is in the front of your head, not the back of your head.
Okay. That's very interesting.
So that's
Okay.
something, if you have a um you'll remember. So if you get hit in the head, you'll remember things that happened to you when you were 13 years old, but you won't remember things that happened to you up to like now, to two
See, and
weeks
that
ago
makes
or a
sense because,
day
like,
ago or whatever. Yeah, your
when I
front,
was about 9,
it's in your
I
frontal
fell out of
lobe.
the tree, and, it was about 2 stories high, because it was up against a house, and I was at the tippity top of the top of the house on the roof, and I came straight down. I busted my chin on the gutter, and I busted my teeth. It was horrible. And then when I fell to the ground, I busted my head, my forehead on the concrete. I was out. I came to, my brothers and sisters were dragging me to the house. I was out again. I don't remember going to not even today, I don't remember They said I woke up coming from the tree to the house a few times. I don't remember that. I don't remember the ride to the hospital. And when I finally came to, I didn't remember anything immediate, but we had a dog at the time that we had had for about 6 years. And they asked me what my name was. I couldn't really, everything was fuzzy. But they asked me if I had a dog, and I said, "Oh yeah, her name's Bridget." And and everybody thought it was
Yeah.
crazy that, but she, I loved her. I don't know why I didn't remember anybody else. But my thing is, I remembered everything before the tree, before
Yeah.
getting that. I remembered perfectly what we were doing. We were playing baseball. My sister, I could tell it. She hit the ball on the roof. I could picture it in my mind to this day, and that was so long ago. But to this day, I still can't remember those vague moments. It's like a blur in a dream.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So the frontal lobe is what
Yeah, that
controls
makes so much
short
sense to me.
term, and the in the back is
Yeah.
more long term, but the front is short term. I have an uncle that had a motorcycle accident, and he hit right here, and it actually severed his optical nerves, and it messed up. I mean, so bad to where they had to take the bone flap out of the side of his head. And he can't remember that he couldn't remember you fed him lunch, but he could remember what happened to him,
Tim.
or he remembered me when I was born.
Yeah.
And that was years and years and years ago, but he couldn't remember what you fed him for lunch.
Yeah.
So short-term memories in the front of your head. So that would be another question I
And
have.
I know I said, just having a look at the comments. Michael said high doses of adrenaline caused by traumatic experiences often cause blackouts and short-term memory loss. Witnesses in wrecks, accidents, etc. often have that issue. And I know, like in trauma, like even from my own experiences, there are things I forgot, and then in talking about it and bringing it back up, brings back memories that
But you remember.
I didn't
And
know I had. Yeah.
you can block out things like when the accident happened, but you generally will remember what happens right before, or I mean, I don't know if you can see right here.
Oh yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I was in a car accident, and I was in a rollover, and I ended up breaking my neck. My neck was broken. I have a cage and a bone graft in my neck. My neck was actually broken. So I don't remember anything that happened during the accident. I don't remember EMS coming to get me. I do not remember getting to the hospital. I do not remember any of that. But I do remember where we were going, where
Mm-hmm.
we ultimately headed. Like how we ended up on that road to
Yeah.
get there, but I don't remember anything after that. And the next thing I really have of that is um um probably about 8 hours or so after I come out of surgery for my neck. But other than that, I don't remember the accident. I don't remember any EMS. I don't remember any of that. So yes, traumatic experiences can, but you're still going to remember what happened before that,
Yeah. And
up until that point. Yeah. That's just psychology.
yeah.
And you can block things out, but generally you'll start, the more and more you hear about things or whatever, you'll start putting two and two together, and that stuff will start coming back, unless your
I
brain
think
is
that's where
injured, and it
a lot
can.
of the mercury comes from is, he's just been very private, and people assume that is guilt. And I have, I've told his, some people that are closer to him that, he can come speak just of anybody else. And maybe he could clear up some of these things that people, nobody's really talked to him too much. He may come on here and remember things that he didn't even remember that he remembers. And so
Could he tell us? I mean, if he could tell us, did you go to the hospital and
yeah,
like get it checked out? Could you tell us that, because we don't have that information
I
from
mean, there
anywhere
are
else?
people saying they didn't even
Um,
see him at the scene. So for him, I feel like that
So
maybe now he should come
there's
speak
a,
to some things.
there's naturally, and naturally in any situation when something like this happens, um the last part, the survivor or the last person to have seen the deceased is a person of interest, and
And I
there's
would like,
always going to be questions about that. And so if you are legitimately innocent, usually innocent people will talk, at least try and be like, hey, I didn't do this. I'm sorry that you think I did, but I didn't, or something. But the fact that there's nothing, and I don't know, we don't know all the specifics on a lot of that, because especially I don't,
yeah,
because I don't know much about it. I was just asked to look in on it. I looked in on the autopsies.
which I loved.
um
I loved that you did not know a lot about what was going on, and you kind of are getting the picture now after. But I like the fact that you didn't know when you looked at the autopsies, because it was very unbiased. It wasn't, nobody can say that you were already given information, because you weren't. You were literally given these autopsies, and I said, can you help me come talk about what is in here?
well, a lot of people, it's hard to read,
Yeah,
especially one that is especially an autopsy that is put together as efficiently as, and I say efficiently as a joke, as
yeah.
that one. Because it really didn't give us much. I mean, it didn't even give us, um it didn't even give us whether there was any tissue intact anywhere on the bodies, anywhere, which would have been nice to know.
It wasn't very
um
specific,
it
is
wasn't
what I was.
specific at, it wasn't very specific, like I said. There at the at there where it said they were both burned 98% of their
Yeah,
body at fourth degree burns, but yet, and then I'll have to send you that page
yeah.
of Joseph's diagram where it's just squiggled lines up and down the body.
That's
Well, clearly we know that, sir. I mean, we know that. Come on now. It was almost, it was almost like disrespectful in a way. Like, come on, dude. I mean, I get it,
I and
but
that's
you
the
could have
thing. A lot
said,
of people say that he didn't have a lot to work with, which is true, I
he
bet,
didn't.
but I also get the
But
feeling that he didn't take the time. He didn't, he looked at it and said, "Well, there's not much to work with here," and that's what he kind of chalked it up to.
well, and he, like I said, he didn't have a lot to work with, but he had a lot more to work with on Joseph than he did Lacey. So that there in itself is kind of weird. I'm like, but we don't we don't know. I just do find it kind of odd that he um was, found to be negligent on all of these other things,
Yeah,
and
and
he
that's
just
the
so
thing
happened.
that hits me the most. Like, I'm not saying that he ruined this autopsy. Do I think that because of who he was, it deserves, especially 2 decades later, some maybe a second opinion? Because he was
Yes.
found as some, and he was going through this while he was still doing the autopsies and signing, and he was literally on the
He
witness stand as he was being incriminated.
well,
So it's not
and
just these autopsies, it's just
I'll go back to what I always say. You know what really where the problem started in this investigation? I talked to somebody who told me that that morning at 6 or 7 o'clock that morning, this happened at 3:30. There was no tape up. There was people wandering around in this scene. just wandering around. There was people all over the place. And so, like I said on Aaron's, the problem starts when you don't secure your scene.
Yeah.
What evidence could there have been that was walked away with? Or what was something could have been brought into the crime scene and contaminated that crime scene?
Now, I have been
Um,
corresponding with somebody with some, very good credibility, and they were putting out, because I asked them, well, why, if the fire in, we don't really know when the 911 call came in, but I have it narrowed down to at least somebody noticed, and we don't know when the fire initially would have started. We don't really have that information, and it's an open case, so that's their excuse for. But I have it pinpointed down to at least somebody noticed between 3 and 3:30, and I have reports of them still laying there as late as 8 a.m. And so, I asked, well, why would they be there laying in there that long? And it was shock. They said, well, we couldn't touch anything. We had to wait for the right people to come, take the pictures, and we weren't allowed to
yeah.
touch nothing. They didn't want to put water on them because they didn't want to um, ruin any more evidence
Contaminate.
that could have been there. So they had to wait for them to, cool down a little.
Well, I was told that they didn't even in the beginning they didn't even know the kids were there.
Which yeah, I was going to bring that up. Between a survivor
But
and his
somebody
dad
did.
being there, that's why I said, why would it take so long for them to even have been found with such. That would have been one of the first things that should have been said, and not somebody stumbled upon them and found them. So I am trying to clear all of that up.
And that right there just doesn't, them firefighters would have had to have gone in to put out any fire that was going on in that place.
And I just think,
They couldn't have done it. I mean, unless it was, and I don't know, I haven't seen those. So, I mean, it could have been burned completely to the ground and there was no inside of the trailer left. I mean, it could have all just been rubble.
I
But
mean,
somebody knew they were there because somebody was there.
and I just, it comes back to the question. I know he doesn't remember a lot, but and we don't even know, like, and that's the thing, to this day, 2 decades later, I feel like, yes, it's still an open investigation, a very cold one, and there's a lot of things that cannot be said, but I think after 2 decades, there are definitely things that they do have that could clear up a lot of these rumors and hearsay and what people are thinking. And I know they're saying, well, that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of trying to figure out the case. But then again, you have to question, are you trying to figure out the case? So what can we
Well,
release now that won't hinder the investigation after 2 decades, that we can clear up some of this misconception?
Well, it's kind of when there is no information out there, it's natural. It's a natural human response for people to make their own assumption. And then that's where your rumors come from. And that's where you get so many different variations of what's really going on. And yes, because it's an open investigation, there are going to be things that cannot be released to the public, but there are things that can um put some of the things to
To
rest
rest.
and
And I
say
think that they deserve that by now.
they do and
If they can't do
to be
anything else, I feel like they can do that. If there's
you know
nothing they.
in this kind of case, unless they have it and they're not releasing it, and that's something that they're not going to release, is that they have physical evidence indicating something. But if they had physical evidence indicating something or someone, that person would already have been tried. and charged, or at least sent to grand jury for an indictment, if they had physical evidence. So I'm really leaning towards that they probably don't. So at this point, pretty much
It would be all be circumstantial.
it would be circumstantial and it would be hearsay. And unless
But there,
somebody,
we do know that even in circumstantial cases, you have so many pieces, it becomes credible piece of evidence.
right, that, and it is. I've seen circumstantial cases tried before, but generally they have somebody somewhere who said something that can corroborate the
Yes.
rest of this
Yes.
circumstantial evidence. So
And I can't help but to wonder, if all these people are cooperating
yeah,
back then, at least at the very least, why weren't they taken more serious? You know what I mean? Because according to everybody, they really just they get the feel that they walked up there knowing that they weren't going to figure it out or work it or whatever. And a lot of it is just, they should
I
have
think
preserved
in
that scene so well. They should
they
have
didn't
treated it like somebody did it and worked backwards.
they didn't. I think what they tried that as was an accident or what they looked at it as was an accident from the very get go. I've heard rumors that they automatically assumed that it was a meth lab that blew up. And
Yeah,
so
and there
you
it's
and
so
I both
far.
going over all of these cases, you and I both know what happens when drugs are
Yeah. Just
even
mention it and
when they're even a thought that they really are like, well, yeah, I feel like they have this, oh, well, it was another drug, just one more druggie off the streets. We don't
yeah.
really got to worry about it. And like I've said before, that's somebody's child, that's somebody's brother, that's somebody's world. And so they deserve justice just the same as somebody who may not have been involved in drugs. But neither um, Lacey nor Joseph tested positive for any type of
Mm-mm.
substance like that. So that when the autopsy come out and said that they did a urine drug screen, that would have at very best picked up methamphetamines.
And
It would
yeah.
have anything like that. So the fact that that didn't jumpstart something there is just kind of what? Why? Like, why not? And I don't know about you, but or if I went to a scene that had children, that was one that we automatically poured our heart and soul
Yeah.
into it, because these are children and we want to find out who killed these children so they don't are not ever able to harm children again. um
And it just blows
but
my
I think they messed up from the very beginning, that they didn't preserve the scene very well. Obviously, if there's somebody out there that morning that was handing out coffee and donuts,
Mhm.
they shouldn't have even been allowed in a proximity to that
And
area.
just by what they seen, it wasn't secure. There were people that were all around there that had no business being there. But a lot of, this person I've been talking to, in chorus back and forth said, they think that people may have had the days confused. Also, that the first day nobody was up there. It was the second day that a crowd started to, but then that's not, and it could be chalked up to people that lived in the area. There could have been enough people just in the media area. It's a small, nosy town, but then you have somebody
What
saying,
was there
no,
really any media out there?
no,
Because
it
there's
was just
nothing that shows
bystanders,
that
just
there
people
was.
people making comments, rude comments, that and people that were there that morning that say they saw, the bodies being removed. So we know that there was a good crowd there at least that morning. Maybe not as much as the second morning, but we do know, and from what I see, they were just walking about. And they were making comments of, they're in there sizzling like bacon. I'm sure if that person's watching, they know exactly who they are. Um, which was just very rude. Everybody just thought it was, and that's what, was a big standout, that they knew there were people there the first morning too. And
Well,
so,
we've already talked to somebody who says
mhm,
they were there that
they
next
kind of
morning.
seen, and there was one ambulance, the fire squad, and the law enforcement.
You
And
know,
it was
I
after 8, it was about after 8 or around 8 that they were finally removed from the scene.
you know, it doesn't matter when people were there. It doesn't matter. Um, Point of the matter was, nobody I've talked to has said that there was ever any tape up,
Mhm.
ever.
But when I even talking to this person that I'm talking to, I asked all the questions, and I'm not saying they intentionally didn't answer it, but that was one of the, can you confirm, when tape went up and stuff, and it was just one of the things that just went unanswered. But I pretty much said, I have people saying that there wasn't even tape up, and it just kind of went unanswered for the moment.
Yeah,
So it just kind
I
of, the things that they aren't willing to say speak to.
right, right. There's a lot of things that are, like I said, there's literally absolutely nothing out in the media about
Mm-mm.
this at all. Nothing. And after so much time, a lot of times when they're trying to get information on a case, they will put it out into the media and they will bring it back up. And that way, if by some chance somebody 20 years later knows something, heard something, whatever, maybe they were being blackmailed or threatened or whatever back 20 years ago, and maybe that person that was doing that is gone now. So maybe they're able to talk. So the fact that there's
Nothing.
still nothing out there, nothing. There is
That's why I
absolutely
made a
nothing.
big deal about a vigil. I said it's their anniversary again, and you still can't find anything on
Nothing.
nothing. No,
Mm,
no tribute, no anything to kind of be like, hey, we haven't forgot about them. I think,
yeah.
it was forgotten about, as I mean, for a long time. I told
It,
everybody
it's
that's why all of this is happening and getting stirred up so much, is because it sat for 2 decades and nobody got and now we're putting it out there, and it's people are talking. People want to talk.
you know, I've heard that evidence has gone missing.
Hmm.
Um
I do have somebody that kind of narrowed it down, that can say with credibility that before they were away from the case, it was handed over to the TBI.
mhm.
So, I'm having, with everybody saying that it was handed over, they kind of came in and took what they had and then took off with it. So I've been kind of saying, okay, well, I'll kind of pipe down on the Gainesboro and kind of start spitting fire with the TBI then, because everybody swears up and down that everything that they documented and they put in there and was handed over to the TBI. And after that, that's where, and then you have, people saying when the TBI came to get that stuff, it was gone. But I have strong belief that the TBI has a lot more, because there are people out there that specifically talked
I
straight to the TBI.
I spoke to somebody that was in one of the families that said that they called down to TBI to get an update
And they
on
have no idea.
anything. They had no idea.
No
They didn't even
idea
know.
about
No,
it.
They knew nothing about it. And that's strange to me
Yes.
because this is one of those cases that should be up here.
Yeah.
This should be nobody nobody does anything else until we figure something out. If we get to a standstill of we have no physical evidence, we have no nothing, we have nothing other than if somebody comes forward and says something, then we can go on that. But other than that, we're done. We
Yeah.
have nothing. We have nothing. Then they need to make that available to the public, saying we went through everything that we have, and there is no physical evidence of anybody. There is no anything whatsoever.
That's, and speaking with all of them, they're just so in the dark and so confused. For after this long, they just want something. Give an update. If you don't
I mean,
have it, tell them that then.
yeah, at this point these families would be okay with, we don't have anything. We don't have anything. If we have,
But they need
if we were
proof
going to build a case, we don't
that they
have
thoroughly
anything.
went back through everything. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
They need
Right.
to
They
see
should say
that they went.
we had some detectives that worked this case for a year or worked this case for however long, and they went back through every single thing that we have and went back over all of the interviews and went back over all of everything, and we don't have anything. We have nothing.
Or tell
We're
them what they will need to make this case. Come
Yeah,
back
or
and say,
tell
this
them.
is exactly what it's going to take.
Right, or tell them, hey, we need somebody to
Yeah.
talk. We need somebody to corroborate this, or we need somebody, but they're not even doing that. When you call up there, they're acting like they don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is strange to me. So that right there in itself makes me wonder, was it really turned over to TBI? Which I think it was, because I think it was a big enough deal that it was. But it's just strange that they know absolutely nothing about it. And I'm like I
I
said, we're
think it's
not
strange
talking
for
about.
whether it was turned over. I know once it's handed over, it's kind of out of their hands. But I also think it's kind of crazy that Gainesboro department and the community, the people that are supposed to protect that community also let it, they could have kept it in the
They
in
could,
the public. They
well,
could have kept it
once
awareness,
it's trans they could have, but pretty much once TBI comes in and takes everything from the local LE, that is, local LE can't,
do
they can't do
anything.
anything else with it. They cannot. We call it traipsing around. Well, we call it shitting in each other's backyard.
Well,
But
don't they have to have
you know,
permission, or are there some cases where they have authority to just come take over? Because I've heard another case, like I'm dealing with the park
usually,
forest.
they are asked to come in.
Okay.
Usually, they are asked. I The fact that they would just come in and step in unless they got wind that something was not right, something wasn't done properly,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
If they got wind of
Hmm.
it, then they probably could come in and say, hey, we got wind of this, we want to take the investigation.
Okay.
So that's like, if if
So
FBI is
Jackson
called
would have
in.
had to call them to come. What are the chances? So you think it's safe to say that Jackson called them to come?
Yeah, I
If
would
they thought it
be.
was an accident, would they have called them in?
I would no, that would be like, I accidentally blew my house up and I called the FBI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? You know what I mean? No, I would think that, I really don't think they ever thought it was an accident. I just don't think that they have enough evidence to prove one way or the other. And so without, and unfortunately, especially even more nowadays, the way everybody is so sue happy,
Yeah.
and all of that, you have to have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed and everything before you take something to trial or before you arrest somebody on murder
So they
charges or
could very
whatever.
well be sitting there knowing exactly what happened, who did it, and
Yep.
they have nothing
Yep.
to take to, or they don't
Yep.
feel like they have strong circumstantial evidence
Yep.
to bring.
Yep. Right. If they don't feel they have anything, they're not going to. They're
So in
not going to do
cases like
anything else
that,
with it.
would they still preserve as much as they can should that
Yeah.
opportunity arrive?
Yep. Yep. Because you don't ever know. This guy could get sent to prison tomorrow and could be bumping his gums to his
Yeah.
cellmate, and his cellmate comes in and says, "Hey, so and so told me this is what he did," and they'll send him back in there to try to get proof, like, they'll wire him or
What if
whatever.
somebody says, what if they did do that with somebody and that informant came back and gave information that investigators feel only those involved would have known? Would that be enough?
Is it My question would be, is it recorded? Because
Ah,
he can say
okay.
whatever he wants to say,
Okay.
but
Well,
unless it's recorded
my
or
vibes were
documented.
that when this was being told to them, their impression was there's no way they would have known this piece of information if they didn't get it from somebody who was involved. But
So
then I
I've
guess
seen
another question is, would was that person who was saying this told this, or were they actually involved in there? So yeah,
my
you bringing up recorded.
I've seen where somebody will come in and they will say, I've seen it happen, where they'll come in and they'll say, so and so told me this. And they're like, okay. And we'll give you immunity if you can get us proof, because you can say anything you want to say. So
Okay.
then they'll send them back in there or send somebody else and see if they can get it recorded or whatnot. And then they can
Okay.
use it.
I
Once there's absolute proof, whether it be on a jailhouse phone, whether it be a camera, whether it be a wire, whether it be something.
I see. Okay.
But as long as it was not documented and there's no proof,
Then it's just hearsay.
unfortunately, it's hearsay, and
I see.
anybody can say whatever they want to say.
Yeah, that makes
I can tell you today that I know who killed so and so, but doesn't mean it's true. You know what I mean? And a lot of people will, believe it or not, there's a lot of messed up people in this world, and a lot of them will say things just for the attention. And sometimes them guys in the prisons and stuff, they'll do it just so they can have a day out of their cell or whatnot. Like, I'll give you some information that you want to know.
yeah.
And they'll tell them, we'll give you immunity, but we want proof. Because without it,
Yeah.
nothing. So they're they might know, they might have evidence, they may, but unless it's something that they can take it to trial,
Now, something like
unfortunately.
failing a lie detector test would not be enough, would it? Because I know that they don't really look at it in court, but they do heavily note it. But say, that still wouldn't be enough to prove
I would think
as
that
evidence. But
failing a lie detector test would corroborate
oh yeah,
something they have.
okay,
Yeah. They may not be able to use it in court and say, hey, this dude failed
yeah, yeah.
however many lie detectors, but it would corroborate. They wanted a lie detector test for a reason.
Yeah.
They don't just ask you to take a lie detector test because they want to. Those are expensive. They're like, and back then I bet they were even more expensive than they are now. And now they're like $900 to $1,200. So they're
So
not going to waste that money if they didn't think that it was going to do them any good.
now I know in some cases it could be chalked up or said that they failed due to emotional stress. So would they, if they wanted to chalk that first one up to, okay, they were just very traumatized at the time, well, wait, give them another one, and they fail that too.
That's why they would give a second one.
And if they both
That would be the that would be the 100% reason that they gave the second one, is because that's what was said, and they were like, okay, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, will you take
right.
another one? And then you fail another one, they're going to be like, sorry dude, that only goes so far.
Okay.
But there's also, these guys who give lie detector tests, they are very highly trained, and they know whether you're messing with your breathing. They know
If you're trying,
everything.
pretty
They
much.
know if you're trying. They can pretty
Okay.
much tell. And there's
Mm-hmm.
also some situations where they will say, okay, well, this could have been this here, this jump here could have been like a trigger or whatever, but this one here, no. And they'll ask the questions around that. They know what they're doing when they do it. They will also ask you when you go in. Also, they will ask about any head injuries, any type of, are you on
Oh,
any type of
okay.
mind altering
Yeah.
substances,
Would they
anything like
render
that.
one then if there was?
No, not at that time. No, they
Okay.
would wait.
Okay.
They would wait and then go from there, because that can be used as an excuse
Yeah.
to, and it can, your brain does some weird things, and so especially so when it's injured or under the influence. So they would ask you that. They would know that before they did that.
I see.
I yeah. They won't give one, like within a day or a two or whatever of an incident. It would be, you know,
So it
a
wouldn't
little
be
bit
like the
later.
same night that it occurred. They would never do that.
No, no, no. Mm-mm.
Very
No,
interesting.
and I most definitely would they would if you said, hey, this is what was going on, and this is why I failed, and then they'd be like, okay, well, we're going to switch around your questions and stuff like that to make them not as triggering and stuff, and then give you another one, and then you fail the other one. Well, they
Then that
come
one
on.
would be noted more, right?
Right, that
That
one
would
would
be
be
more
noted.
definitive.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because they would swap it around and stuff like that to make sure that
And if
that
that was,
isn't in
they
fact
wouldn't
what
really
happened.
so much acknowledge the first one then, would they? They would
No,
just go based off the second one.
they would go by the second one. That's why. And then
Okay.
if something on the second one and then you come up with another excuse, then they give you a third one. But generally, a lie detector test, yeah, I can tell them a lot, but without other information, they don't necessarily have enough. That's not enough to just say this person did it. Because one of the questions will be like, do you know of, or do you know someone who could have
Yeah.
done XYZ? And so then, so then on the next one, they'll fix that.
So,
They'll ask it a different way.
yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
So, I mean, if they had just a lie detector test, if that was all they had, then that wouldn't really be enough to take it to trial, because they can't use it in
Okay.
trial.
I see. Okay.
And if they had circumstantial evidence, but it still wasn't enough,
A lot,
then
that type of thing.
that's enough. If you fail a lie detector test, that's enough to keep you as a person of interest.
Okay.
But may not necessarily be enough to take you to trial
Thank you.
or
Yeah.
charge you with murder.
That's
And they'll ask questions too in those, like, could there be any reason that you would believe um, that this could have been an accident? And
Now, is
then
there a certain
that's
amount, I
another.
see JC asked a question right here. Is there a certain amount of times, how many times can one take a lie detector test? Do they usually?
They can give you as many lie detector tests as you want, but usually they won't do more than 3 because they're expensive, and really more than that isn't telling them any more than
Than what
what,
they've
you know what
already.
I mean, than what they already know. They are pretty much, if they're gonna send you for a lie detector test, they are almost certain of something. They just want to
Um,
find out, are they certain? They're not gonna just be like, hey,
and even
you.
with that, even if they are certain, if they don't have enough evidence, they can't.
Right. And even if they're certain and they don't have any evidence other than the lie detector test, they can't, because murder trials are expensive,
Yeah.
and they're not going to gamble on the fact that this guy failed a lie detector test, and you can't even bring that up in court. I've seen it happen that they've brought lie detector tests up in court. I've seen judges that have allowed it, but there's also a other amount of evidence that goes with it.
Yeah.
And also varies by state
Now,
and judge.
if they if they did have a good idea of what happened, and let's just specifically talk about the Gainesboro 4 here because it's 2 decades old. Would there do you think that there would ever come a time where they would just say, "Look, we do know it wasn't an accident, but we can't prove it." Could they at least admit to that?
Yeah.
Not say we know somebody or we know specific.
They can.
Generally just
Yeah,
say that.
they could. Yeah, they could. They could say, we know it wasn't an accident, but we don't have enough evidence to prove who it was, or vice versa. Yeah,
And they
absolutely. They
could
could come out
publicly
and say
say,
that, and say, look, we know that it wasn't an accident, but we can't prove anything. But a lot of these places are not even going to do that, because then it makes them look like
doing
they
their
don't do their, they don't, yeah, like it makes them look like they don't know what they're doing.
which is
So instead of just being like, we know, but yeah, they're not going to. And I think in this case, that I think they still do want to figure out what happened. I just think they don't know where else to go with it.
not.
I think they do, because if not, they would have closed the case. It was an accident, especially knowing Ellie in Tennessee the way I've seen. If they didn't think that there was anything else, they would just say it was an accident, close the case. Nobody has to mess with it again, and be done with
I
it.
think that's what kind of got everybody confused when we first started coming out with everything, is because a lot of people said they investigated this and it was closed. And then I'm like, no, it's cold. It's not closed. If they thought it was an accident, you would think that it would have been closed
Right.
at least a lot
If
sooner than 2 decades later.
Right. And that's the thing, is that I think they have something. They have something somewhere.
They just have to
But
have it.
I don't think they have enough evidence to come out and say who or what. Otherwise they would have already done that. They would have come out and said, we didn't find in our investigation, we didn't
Yeah.
find any wrongdoing at any point in time from any of these avenues that we checked. And we checked them all out thoroughly. We asked every question there was to ask. But they're not saying that, because I think that they do. They have something. They have something somewhere.
I just don't
But
think
I just
they
don't
have
think
corroborated it yet.
if you don't have anything to corroborate this stuff, there's nothing you can do. I mean, you cannot charge somebody based on what you think. You have to be able to prove it. You know, I have my own opinion on it, and I can think that till the cows come home. But
Yes.
unless I can prove it, that's just what I think, you know, and it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And that's why I try really, really hard to not. That's why I try really hard for people to understand that this is my opinion and
Right,
not what I'm
right.
saying is what happened, because I don't know what happened. If I knew what happened, I'd already be in Tennessee at the TBI and somebody would already be in jail.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I have to just go with, this is what I in my opinion, what I think happened. And that's about all you can do.
Well, I
Until you can prove.
appreciate you coming on and giving some insight. I don't think the public had any knowledge of what were in those reports, especially with everybody saying, what if it, they were probably just drunk and passed out. Well, no. They probably had Xanax in there. Well, no, they didn't. They weren't. And I think those are very good details that
Mm-mm.
people should know. It clears up a lot of things.
And then we also have the one that was going around that they were not alive.
Yes. And they were, yeah,
When the
yes.
house, they were alive. And I got asked that question by both families. How do you know? Is there any way possible that they could have been? And I'm like, no. They had classic telltale smoke inhalation. They were breathing, and I know that was very hard for the families to hear. um and
Yeah.
that's the part that I don't like to do. Is I was hoping I could get into those reports and say, nope, they were gone. You know, it would be a whole lot easier on the families, because one of them made a comment to me, I just hope she didn't lay there and suffer.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I hope she didn't feel any pain.
Yes.
And so that's one of the hardest parts of this for me, is not being able to tell them that they were no longer with us when this happened.
I can
But
imagine.
they were. And they were. Those were
But it's
classic
also good
telltale.
to know. It's also good
It
to know.
is. It is. And in the grand scheme of things, it makes you question even more. Why did they not try to get out?
Yeah.
Did they not know anything was coming? Or did they know the person?
Now,
Or, you know,
could there have been a possibility that they were tied up, but they were just so badly burned that they could
yeah.
not tell?
Yeah, that's always a possibility, because they didn't have any clothes and any type of anything to tie them up with, i.e.
Would have
rope
been.
or rubber or anything like that would have been burned. I mean, they had no clothing, no shoes, no nothing on. So yeah, that's absolutely 100% always possible. But um do I think so? I would, no. If the scenario that I was told is correct, which, like I said, the
Yeah.
autopsies lead more towards that,
Yeah.
but we have other information leading the other way. Um, that at least we know that Joseph and Lizzie
We're alive.
were able to move. So
And that's so heart wrenching to think about.
So do maybe, do I know? I don't know about TJ, and I don't know if TJ was incapacitated in any way because
Right.
I don't have his autopsy. And Lizzie, I don't know if she was incapacitated in any way because I don't have hers. But I can tell you that Lacey and Joseph were both alive and they were breathing. Were they asleep? Very possible. I mean, people die in trailer home fires every single day because they were asleep and they couldn't get out fast enough.
Yes, it is very,
That
yes.
happens. It happens. Could they have been asleep? Yes, very much. And see, and these are the things that also, and I will defend law enforcement and TBI on this. Those are questions that they don't know either. There's
Yeah.
no way to know.
Yeah.
Without an eyewitness testimony or eyewitness saying, I saw them, they were up and moving. But the one that I've heard is that he looked in the window and they weren't. So,
Yes, his Derek's dad was supposedly to look in the window and
but that
seen.
that there it that makes me have more questions. Well, you could see in the window that they weren't moving. Well, then you were that close. Then the house couldn't have been that much on fire at that point if you saw that they weren't moving. So why did you not try to help them? Why did
That,
you not beat on the walls and the windows and stuff to
well,
try to
and
wake them up?
that's another, questionable area because I have reports that by the time, his dad got there, the trailer was gone and there was nothing that he could do. But then I have other reports of, people saying Derek, he got close enough to the trailer. How is that possible? He would have been, if it was burning that much, he would have been burnt. He wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah,
So,
or
and
and
those are
then
another
if you
things that that as far as Derek coming on, I would really like for him to just come up and clear the little things that he can remember.
because I always say anything that you can, like, especially on his part, if he wants to clear that up, then that takes those questions out of people's minds
Yes, and
and
that's
they
all I
don't
wanted.
have those
Mhm.
questions and they aren't asking over and over and over,
Yes.
well, because then your mind starts wondering, well, he said this, but that couldn't have been because that would have meant that he was close enough that he could have banged on the windows and or broke a window and helped
Yeah.
these kids out, or there's just a whole lot of other questions.
Yeah.
So if you can just nip that one in the ass right there, that does some good on all levels. I just
And that's all it's been 2 decades.
I'll my
I'm
thing,
sure there
I'll
were rumors
defend you.
back then. I'm sure those rumors grew, and the more we could clear up and focus and sift through that, because
I'm the type of person, if you will come out and answer the questions, I will, and you will, face us and say, these are the questions you have, and this is what I know. I can then go through and say, well, he's right.
yeah,
That's he's right. That's how that would have happened. Or okay, well, you were there, I wasn't. You know what I mean?
right, right.
And I don't have any crime scene photos, and I've never been to this property before in my life, or you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So a lot of what he says, I can't really I can't really argue with him, or
Yeah,
unless it's something
yes.
that I can prove one way or the other. And you've learned and already about me that I'm not gonna I'm not gonna stick to my guns on something that I can't prove.
Hmm. Absolutely.
If I can't prove it, I'm not gonna say that no, this is in fact what happened, because that's what I think happened. I mean, without proof, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
I
that's
appreciate your
where I'm at on
insight.
that.
I do. I appreciate you coming on here. I appreciate you just
I
taking the
know that
time.
I know that we are working right now on trying to get at least TJ's autopsy.
Yeah.
And then so whatever we can get from that, and then we've got some others that will be in contact with me on anything else that they hear or whatnot. But at this point, I don't have really anything else on it because there's nothing on it anywhere.
Mm-mm.
Um,
I think getting the I think it's a very good place to start.
Another thing that we need to really, really focus on, and I've said this in other cases, and I'll say it in this one too. One of the things that we need to try to get is a 911 transcript.
You know, I just reached out and asked about that today. Like I said, I've been talking to a person that can tell me as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told that back then, they didn't have a 911 center in Gainesboro. They actually didn't get that until that year in June. So the 911 transcript was handwritten, and that quote, the TBI should have it in their file today. It was handwritten. They didn't get however that goes. They didn't have the 911 just for Gainesboro at the time. That came June 2002. So when that report was called in that night, it was handwritten.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to get your perspective on that too.
I would say because the 911 center is, or 911 in general, is run by the local police department.
That's what Michael
I
and
know,
I were
like
just
down
saying
in,
that.
huh?
After hours, 911 was routed through Cookville. Oh, that's very
Okay.
interesting.
Well, then Cokeville should have a transcript on it. And those would be kept in the records for the police department or Cokeville Police Department because that's who governs the 911
So it wouldn't have been
dispatch.
handwritten. It wouldn't have been called into
It
the.
could have
Could
it
they
could have
still have
been, but
handwritten? Okay.
yeah, it could have been handwritten, absolutely, if they didn't have a computer to put it into, because computers were a completely different thing than they are nowadays. But there should still be a copy of it
Somewhere. Well, now,
somewhere.
if everything got handed over to the TBI, would these departments still have a copy in their database, or would it be hard copied
Yeah,
out all over
they
the TBI?
should. They
Okay.
should, because if any um anything ever came up, like saying that dispatcher did or said something wrong or whatever, that would be up to the local police department to handle that, not the TBI.
Okay.
That's what the transcript's for, is basically
Yeah.
to
A ref.
make
Yeah.
sure that what the dispatcher is doing, or you know what I mean, that's what it is to document what's going on and who put so those are governed by police, the local police department. Yeah, TBI probably has a copy of it, because they would need to know who put in the 911 call and when it went in and when the fire was put out and all of those things. So yeah, I'm sure they have a copy of it.
Do you think
But
that 20 years later it will be? I'm not sure. I
um
guess it depends on how long they keep
it
records.
just depends on how long they keep their
Yeah.
records. I know that in some places it's only up to 7 years,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
but that they're legally have to. But I would think in a situation like this that they should be somewhere.
Interesting.
I can't imagine that they turned their only copy of the 911 call over to TBI.
But if the TBI took over, they should definitely have a copy, right?
Yeah. Because that tells a lot. What time did the 911 call come in? And what did that person who called in the 911 call say about the fire? Could they see it? Was it inside? Was it outside? I mean, they're going to ask those questions. Um, so yeah, they would have one because that gives time when
Yes.
the volunteer fire department went out, that gives time when EMS went out, that gives time when the medical examiner went out, that gives time when detectives went out, that gives time to every single thing that happened. So yeah, TBI would definitely have a copy of it because yeah, the 911 call tells you a lot.
Yeah, that's why it's so tricky to get in Tennessee. There's Lisa just posted up. I'm gonna post it up here for everybody to see. Um, due to the passing of Bill HB 335 in 2020, it basically says if the cops don't want to give it to you, they don't have to.
On the police report or the 911 call?
911 transcripts. Yeah.
Hmm.
They don't have to if they don't want to, and that's my thing. Like these and I keep going back to Holly Bobo because that's the one that came to mind. Everybody kept on, you need to, and I'm looking into it, I'm diving into it because pretty much these cops fucked her case up so bad that they had to instill laws to protect themselves. So they, you go ask and you say the Holly Bobo, show me where you messed up. Now they don't have to release anything that incriminates them in messing up anything. And there's
Right.
laws that protects them from having to do that now. And one of those laws
Wow.
are the HB 335 law that it says they do not have to give you 911 transcripts if they don't want to.
Hmm. That's not how it is here, but like you said, they've had to pass laws to protect themselves on
Yes.
that. So,
And I think
it
Tennessee
could very
just took
well.
gross advantage of those laws.
Oh, it. Anything that they have that they can, they will. But yeah, the 911 call would tell you a lot. But if they don't want to give it up and they don't have to, then
Yeah,
you know,
it needs that just needs it needs to be out of there. At least the 911 transcript. That's ridiculous. I know
because I
there's another case where oh, the Gilgo Island, maybe, no, up in New York. Anyways, there was this girl that went missing, and trying to find her, they found a string of bodies. But when this girl went missing, she had called 911 and was on the phone for 20 minutes and pretty much stated that she was scared people were chasing her, pretty much laid it all out. And this was back in early 2000s too. And to this day, they are still fighting them to get the 911 recording. And there you are allowed to have it. So they are trying to
wow.
get that. And
Well,
it will clearly tell, like, it has so much information in there. And people
we
wonder,
always
why
say,
after all this time, if there's that much information in there, why is nothing been done? It's crazy. And if
well,
911s are that telling, we should know.
the reason that they don't want to release it is because they are that telling. Um, any police department that doesn't feel even, any case like, hold on just a second. I just got a text.
I just think it's crazy. I don't think that until released by a judge. 911 transcripts are not public knowledge until released by a judge.
So in the case, there was a missing guy in Texas, and he'd been missing for a lot of years, many like 8 10, something like that. Anyways, he had actually called 911, and it was in a small town in Texas like that. And their 911, they didn't have a call center, and it had been routed through one of the the person who took the 911 was at a nursing home, and they sure did release those 911 tapes. They didn't release the transcripts, but they released his call, and to say so people knew what he was saying and stuff like that. And so I just kind of feel like if there was no reason, like if they didn't feel like it was a threat to them, then they
Yes.
should release it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
If the police didn't think they did anything wrong, then they shouldn't have any problem releasing it.
And that is where we stand. Yes.
Because like I said, in that case is one of them. And then there's also one down in a case I've also talked about, the Jason Landry case, and they released the 911 calls too on that one.
It's just,
you could get a lot of information out of a 911 call, but not so much the call, the recording, as the
transcripts.
The transcript. The transcript lists everything itemized out with names, everything, time, everything, badge numbers. I mean, everything. Wow. So that's why I say transcripts are really, really handy to have. But if they won't release it, there's a reason they won't release it. Because if it was innocent, then they wouldn't have a problem with it.
And I'm sure in this case, their whole reasoning would be, oh, it's an open investigation. That's the leg that they're going to use on this one.
So was the other cases, Jason Landry, and they actually just found Brandon Lawson's body like 2 weeks ago. But it was an open investigation, and it's still an open investigation because they suspect foul play in his death now that they found him. So they're both open investigations, and they've released 911 calls.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. 911 call isn't protected. A police report is, and an investigation report is. But not
and in Tennessee, it seems to be that it is.
It seems
heavily
to be
guarded.
It seems to be anything that has to do with any investigation is heavily guarded, whereas they're not in other states, which is horseshit.
Alarming.
I mean.
And I think that's why everybody's like, well, why are you covering Tennessee cases? There's this everywhere. And I was like, not on this level. I think it's very, very saturated in Tennessee for some reason.
Before I had gotten in looking at these cases, I had no idea that this kind of negligence existed in law enforcement.
I think it's hard.
I really didn't
believe.
Like people, I've talked to a couple of my other, colleagues and friends and stuff like that, and they are just like shocked. Well, this wasn't done, and I'm like, no. And they're like, this wasn't done, and I'm like, no. And they're like, why not? And I said, well, there's the $1 million question. If we ever figure it out, we'll be rich.
I just feel like if they're not held up to the accountability that they need, then what's to stop them from not investigating things to their full extent? If nobody has to hold them accountable for their actions, why investigate it then?
Well,
I mean, they could just go look at like the Gainesboro. They could walk right up to that bad boy and say, oh, nope, it's an accident. We just don't got to show them everything. That's all. What?
I think on the Gainesboro, I think they started out with the right intentions. Except for on the autopsies on both kids, both Lacey and Joseph, they aren't even listed as suspicious deaths. They're listed as cremations. They're not even listed as suspicious on their autopsy.
Oh, wow.
And they both are listed as cremation, so it doesn't even list it as a like it doesn't list that it's suspicious at all. So that right there is another thing that I meant to mention as well, is that I found that kind of interesting that neither one of them were foul play suspected or suspicious or any of that.
Wow. It just really speaks all of it. I just think one thing we can say is that they did not think it was an accident.
I don't think they did think it was an accident.
I don't. And I
I
think they
just
need to
think that
stop saying they can't prove either or, and they need to say, look, we know it wasn't an accident, we just can't prove it. And stop letting
right.
people believe that there was a possibility of it being an accident if they at least know that it wasn't.
Right. And they absolutely could do that, but I don't think they want to close the investigation because they have something that leads them to believe that it wasn't an accident. Otherwise, they would have already done that. It's been 20 years. And there's no telling. I
No.
mean, I guess if people nowadays don't know what they're talking about when they call TBI, but at some point there was a detective on this case that was on the case for a long
Oh
time.
yeah, there was. I have his
Um,
name, and it's just
so that's why I say if they thought it was an accident, they would have said that already. If
if they
if
thought it was an
they
accident,
and I
TBI would
don't
have
think
never
they
been called, right?
right. And I don't think that they want to say we just can't prove anything yet. I don't think they want to say that yet, because if they say that, then they pretty much close the case and it just goes into the for lack of better words, into the filing cabinet as a cold case, and it's closed. And but they don't usually close them until. But if they thought it was an accident, they would have said that already.
And it would have been closed a long time. It wouldn't have been
And
sitting.
if they didn't think they had something, they would have said, "We just we just can't prove anything." And they could tell the families that and say,
I think it's
we
time
just
for
cannot prove anything one way or the other yet."
I think it's time for TBI to take all those files out, re-go over everything, and come back and at
Which
least close
makes me
one.
question why they haven't. Once the
Yes.
families, because they like Joseph's dad was saying, he's called up there like once a year
Yeah.
asking for an
And a
update.
few stay up to in contact with them, and
Why has nobody why has
fresh eyes,
nobody
nothing.
gone and gotten those files out and gotten all that stuff out and said, well, maybe we ought to just take another look real quick and see if we can see something that somebody else didn't see or whatever. But they're not. And so it's just confusing to me, because like I said, if they thought it was an accident, they would have said that already.
Yeah. And that's
So to leave an open investigation like that, and then but a lot of times they won't. I mean, they have people that will come in and do new investigations on cold cases, but for some reason this one hasn't. But then
yeah.
again, this one has like no media coverage. This one has like no nothing out there, so nobody even knows anything about it to even go looking for it.
And that was another reason when I first looked into it, I was like, there's nothing. And my question is, geez, after 2 decades, what would happen if we just put it out there now? And and the families have been so amazed to see everybody come together.
I think there's a lot of people that want to know what
Yeah.
happened. There's a lot of people,
I
and then
think
you
it's a
get
lot of
people
people
like
that want
me
to
that
talk
didn't.
now. It's been 2 decades.
That's Well, and that's the problem, is that the people that should have talked in the beginning still aren't talking, which speaks volumes. I mean, there's a reason. Because now 20 years, if you didn't have anything to do with it, you didn't think anything about it, and you didn't think they were ever going to connect anything to you or anything, or you don't think you were a person of interest or any of that, why would you not? It's been 20 years. Talk about it. Tell us what we need to know. Or tell us if we're going the wrong direction, tell us that.
Yeah. Yes.
But I've always said it, and they taught us this in school, is that silence speaks volumes, especially after a
Absolutely.
long
That's what I
period of
say.
time.
It's what they're not telling me that I listen to.
It's
What
what they're
they're not
not saying.
answering, what they're not. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
And
think somebody
their
said
autopsy.
earlier, reading, you got to read between the lines. And I think that's what I do. A lot of people will tell you, I see things that aren't being said.
And
And I
I do
think,
too.
and a
I
lot of the
just
families are saying, I think this is what you're supposed to do, because I can see that. And it's
you
just,
have to. And I can read, after doing all this and everything, I can pretty much read a person too. And I know I can read body language when I can read you whenever you ask a question and
you shift.
how your response
Yeah.
is to it. And just, there's a lot of things that aren't being said in this case.
Well, I appreciate you coming. I don't want to take up all your night.
I got a date.
I know you were telling me earlier, and I just looked. I was like, "Oh, we're 2 hours into this thing." But
It's
you can
okay.
come back always. I appreciate your insight. You're like a
Once
person.
I can get a hold of anything, any of the other autopsies, or if you can, or get a hold of
Yes,
anything other, or you have any questions or whatever, my inbox is always open, and I don't mind coming in and giving my advice or opinion on,
yes,
what I can know. But so what we do know right
yeah.
now, what we do know for 100% fact is that those two kids were alive and breathing.
They
We
were
know that.
not drunk. They did not have a bunch of drugs in their system.
Nope. And from everybody I've talked to, these kids were good kids.
Yeah.
They weren't your hellraisers. They weren't any of that. We all at those ages drank with our friends on a.
17 hanging out on a Saturday night, not
We
doing
all
a
did
damn
that.
thing.
So that does not, that means nothing to me. But no, they did not have any type of substances in their bodies or in their urine that would have led them to believe a meth lab or drug
Yeah.
situation, other than somebody's mouth was running at some point
Yeah. Yep.
and was talking about the wrong thing. But so that's what we do know now, and that right there, we're a lot further than we were when we started. So,
Absolutely. And I hope that we can get the other two and we can kind of bring it in full circle as far
I
as
know
these are
I know that they had requested TJ's.
yeah, I heard that they were in the process of trying to, yeah. And
Because apparently those are public record in Tennessee.
I will definitely be interested in learning about Lizzie's, because from what I do know and have been told, she was the least she was the one with the majority of skin left. So I would be very interested to see what her
Yeah.
brought about.
Yeah, and then that really supports what I had heard.
But and like I said, we don't know this for sure. That's why we really want to
Yeah,
bring them all
that's why I
together.
want to see the
Yeah.
autopsies together, and so that way I can make a better opinion on it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will talk with you
Yes, I
later.
appreciate it. Thank you. I will definitely
Okay.
be reaching out for you to come back on.
Okay, we'll talk at you soon then.
You have fun on your date.
Okay, I will.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys learned a few things. I did. when I talked to her and we went over them. I was very shocked to learn, from all the things being said out there, that they just weren't in the autopsy. As far as the drinking, the drugs, and all of that, I think it's safe to say, at least that wasn't the reason why they could not get out. Whether they were asleep or unconscious, we don't know those things, but you know, it did. I think doing this will kind of clear up a lot of. We need to start somewhere, especially in a situation like this. So I think that this will be a very good place to start. While I have you guys, I do have a few updates. I'm not going into specifics, but Tuesday night, everybody should be watching Fox 17 News for support. And it should become, that is all I will go into that. I also want to bring up the fact that I've gotten some information about, there's been this big talk as far as Cookie is concerned and this possible alibi that he had. And everybody keeps saying, between you guys and the feelings that you've gotten from the LE, that, everybody knew that she was lying. And, my question has always been, well, if everybody knows this, then what do they have? Why isn't it a big deal? Why, So I kind of asked the question. I got some answers, and, I don't ever want to keep a narrative that it shouldn't be out there. I'll never withhold anything, no matter what we've been talking about. So, I think one of the main reasons why everybody knew that she was lying is there was footage of Cookie at a gas station around this time, something that would definitively not put him there, at least. So I think that kind of contributes to why they kind of brushed it off, maybe. But I am trying to get time frame for that. I'm trying to narrow the times down. Is because he was seen on footage, and to me that at least puts him not there. And I think that is very important for people to know. I'm not saying he wasn't involved. I'm not saying either way, we don't know that, but I can at least say that I think this is why you guys are so confused about the alibi, is because they had reason to believe definitively that he was not there. He was at a gas station. So the more I narrow that down, I feel at this point, I've seen in the comments that Cookie is watching from prison. If that's the case, if he has that much connection, then I would really like him to email me or message me, or however he can do that from prison. I've never been in. But if he has that much ability to be watching the podcast, then I just want to say hi, that I want to hear your side of things. And you can be free to email me, message me, however you are able to do that. I would love to get your side and hear, just a statement from you. The car location. I have learned that it is not in a local impound, but I have strong feelings to believe that it is not in a local, but a state impound. That is all the information that I was given on that. I figured those of you in Tennessee would know what that specifically was until I figure it out. But it was thought to be believed that it is still locked up in the state impound. So, that'd be a good place to start for evidence too, if they do still have that, a quick photo to show the damage. I just think after 2 decades, there's plenty of things that they could do without hurting the investigation. I would imagine that they would have fingerprinted the car. I would imagine they would have done a lot of things. But I do know that if they didn't, yeah, there's strong reason to believe that it is locked up in the state impound. There are a few other things that I am going to start bringing out that, I've been hearing everybody. I just want everybody to know that. I've been seeing it and I've been hearing all of you. It's just easier for us and me to, go down each side of things separately. I will say, we covered the cookie, account, and I'm still, developing that. We're still working as long as you guys keep coming to talk and we keep you guys safe to do that. However you choose, we can keep it going. But, there have been other things brought to me that I feel now that we are going to start to go down that road and start to bring those out and try to get, people talking about that. I still encourage the families are so grateful for everybody that has came and talked, anonymous or not. They don't care. They really don't. They don't care to know your name. They don't even ask me. So they just appreciate you coming up there and they getting to know things that they never knew. Things that they could have possibly known had they not been in the dark so long. I have strong reason to believe that Gainesboro is watching. In fact, there's reason to believe that they missed last night's episode. So it's safe to say that they are. And as much as I've been giving them heat, it's kind of, maybe they don't know. I'm not saying the ones back then didn't, but I think, it was kind of handed off and they weren't told things. They asked them to come for a reason, I believe. But I do think that once it was handed over, they didn't really have, and maybe they are just relearning some things as we go along themselves. So with that being said, I think it's safe to say that the TBI has all the information and that they should probably go comb through it, sift through it, and come out with an update, something that they could say. Even if they can't definitively say anything, there's plenty that they could, obviously, that we've talked about tonight that they could say. Make a statement, give an update, have somebody do it if you don't want to do it. I don't care. I don't know. All I'm saying is, it's been 2 decades. There's something that you could come through and come back and tell these families. And with that, we're going to end on that. Like I said, the next time you see me up here, we're going to kind of start going down another, road that has been brought to me. And I just want to remind everybody to just continue to be respectful. If anybody chooses to come talk, whether it's anonymous or not, please keep doing what you're doing. I can take the mean people coming at me. I'm okay. I want to talk to them too. I've reached out to them and said, then come tell me, come speak, because I want to know your account too. I'm not here just to have one side of the picture. If we're going to do this, I need all sides. So those people that are yelling at me, all I ask is you come talk and do it respectfully. And I will give you the same respect and I will have your back while you're up on my screen that I do anybody else. I want to hear you. I had a lady reach out to me and she was very rude. And then I said, listen, come speak. I'm not here to shut you out or keep anything shoved down. I think that's been done enough here. Y'all just got to do it nice, okay? That's all I'm saying. It's just be nice to me. And I got you. You'll be up here. I want to hear you. So I offer it to any side. I had a wonderful conversation with somebody who came at me and then I said that and they kind of changed their tune a little bit. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I want to hear you guys too. You just got to be nice. That's my role. So I think it's very important to hear all sides. I can't, like, this whole, if Cookie wasn't there, y'all. And if they had, if there is proof and it comes to light that he just wasn't there, at least that's the very least we can say here. And I think clearing up those things really help. So your guys' accounts are much needed. So I want to get to the bottom of it. So, we sift through one thing and we'll go through it all. Every side. So you guys have a good night. This is Ashley TC Spotlight. Until next time, stay safe.